Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. You've tuned into Dr. Judy WTF here on UBN Radio Network. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, and the Dr. Judy of Dr. Judy WTF is Dr. Judy Rosenberg. And we are going to continue our series tonight on narcissistic children. And we're going to talk about the scapegoat child. And we're going to talk about how you are one, how you can be one, and how not to be one.
And people are lining up.
They're lining up on that one. And this is a call-in show. So if you want to call in and get on the couch with Dr. Judy with your emotional ouch, please do, as you have for, golly, like the last 2 months. And the number here in the United States is area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. Or if you're calling out in the universe and like out of the country, you can call us on Skype, and it's UBN Radio number 2. That's U for Universal Broadcasting Radio, UBN Radio number 2. And you can pull us, and we're here every Thursday, for those who've been asking, at 8 o'clock here Pacific, broadcasting from the Sunset Gower Studios right here in the heart of Hollywood. And you, of course, find us on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and, of course, YouTube. So if you have any comments, I just wanted to start when we have with a testimonial from a lady that was amazingly gave us a great one on YouTube last week.
Yeah, pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to thank the audience for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Once again, I have a little laryngitis, but not as bad as another time.
You sound sexy, Dr. Judy.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes.
I should just keep overusing my voice, and that'll be a permanent state then.
What this really is just telling you that she's not going to admit to is she sees a lot of patients. She's very popular, and as well as all of her associates as well.
You know, I'm really, really coming to a huge, I had this conclusion before, but now it's even more obvious how much pain and suffering we're in as a human race. And I really, really want to thank the audience for listening. All the comments, good, bad, and different. I just think it's great that you guys are self-expressing rather than repressing your feelings, because as you know, if you understand a little bit about the system, the mind map system, whatever we repress becomes depressed and turns to depression.
And I love your definition of depression is anger turned inward.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're either turning our anger inward, we're turning our anger outward, we're imploding, we're exploding, and we're hoping that you will call in and unload.
Right. Don't explode, don't implode, but unload. Exactly.
And by the way, my staff has agreed to offer 15-minute free consultations. Mm-hmm. Okay, so get on the website, drjudywtf.com, and there on the website are people like, obviously, myself and Jillian Sorkin, who has a master's degree in psychology, Eric Perry, who is almost doctoral degreed, and then we have other people who I think we still have to upload pictures of. Jay Clapperman, he has an MA. He's our Mr. Sliding Scale. He was on one of our episodes. And we also have Dr. Veronica Glusker, latest addition to our team from the Wright Institute.
You have a psychiatrist too now, too.
Yeah, we have a psychiatrist on board, Dr. Jonathan Whitfield, and he's available. Yeah, great guy. Yeah. And he is available to do the psychiatric evaluations. And the cool thing about him is he is part of our multidisciplinary team, so that means that he and I consult. I'm not big on meds, but in some cases they're necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Dr. Jonathan Whitfield's philosophy is to put them on there, but get them off of the meds ASAP. And so we work together. So thank you very much to all the team. And all of you know that I have a book out called Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect.
It's available on Amazon, on Kindle, and in paperback. And lots of you folks have read it, so thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So I just want to address the outcome of the presidential election, because it is definitely...
Very quickly.
Very quickly, I just want to acknowledge Hillary Clinton and all the work that she put into campaigning, and Donald Trump and all the work that he put into it. It takes a lot of guts to get out there and do this.
Sure
and
does.
It's just not an easy process for anyone. And I know that we're very divided as a nation as a result of this. And so I'm really appealing to the American people to come together as a united nation now, in spite of, or whatever. If you've been Clinton fans, our president is now Donald Trump. So let's give him an opportunity.
President-elect.
President-elect. Let's give him the opportunity and the support to lead. And if it were Hillary Clinton, I would say same. And so now that the people have voted, I think that we owe him the opportunity to get our support and give him that chance. So
you had mentioned two issues. Actually, we're chatting about the election on Tuesday. I really wish you'd elaborated on this before, but there's some emotional issues that Dr. Judy had talked about that of why one wasn't able, if you will, to vote for Hillary and or Donald Trump. And you want to expand on that real quick?
I do. I think that, obviously Donald Trump has been associated with being rude and crude and misogynist and racist and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that the message has been very, very, very strongly delivered that he is that person. And I think that women in particular who've been molested or
and
abused by a man, particularly sexually, may have associated him with all of that.
And not feeling safe.
And not feeling safe sexually. So I think women who don't feel safe sexually may have just said, I'm going to pass on him. All I need to hear is that he did such and so to women. I'm done. On the other hand, I think that Hillary's become associated with the covert aspect of betrayal, betraying the country, the whole thing about the server and hiding the emails and so on. And I think that people who have issues with betrayal and issues with their mother, that maybe their mother betrayed them, I think that that's all they needed to hear, and they're not voting for Hillary. So just realize that a lot of the votes have to do with your transference,
and not
your projection
with politics
onto that candidate. In a big picture way, I just wanted to say one thing about how I see why Trump won the election, and this is how I see it. I think that in general, if you go to panel number 5,
and there also, you can, if you're on iPhone, you can actually pull up Psychological Healing Center on your app for your iPhone, panel 5. There you go.
Right. And from a mind map perspective, I can really understand why Trump won. And here's what I think about that. I think that we're in a time in world events where we're not feeling safe. We're just not feeling safe. And I think that in a broad sweep, general way, and please understand that I'm being very general here, I think that Hillary represented loose borders. She represented, a pass-through to America. She represented, if we're looking at 3 little bears and 3 little chairs, okay, one is too soft, one is too hard, and one is just right. And I think that as a people, we're really not feeling safe on economic levels, on national security levels, and I think that Donald Trump, in a big picture way, represented let's take our boundaries and shut them down, literally, because we're too permeable as a people. We're leaking energy out to other nations, and so I think that the people were too scared to leak out and not protect. And so from a Panel 5 perspective, I think they voted, let's become more impermeable. Let's become let's act like non-permeable membranes. And I think that Hillary was representing, no, let's act like permeable membranes. And I think the spirit is, let's just play it safe. So that's my take on that.
Well, thank you, Doctor.
And I'd love to hear your comments.
And if you have any comments on that or others, you can call us. Excuse me, and I'm working on a cold too. And we're at 323-843-2826, or you can call us on Skype at UBN Radio number 2. I want to talk real quick about just one testimonial that was amazing. This is a lady called Limitless Thinker.
Okay.
That was last week regarding our show last week we did on the lost child. And basically, this woman is 61 years old, and she said, basically, what an incredible overview. I have been watching hundreds of videos, and this one just described my family dynamic when growing up. I just turned 61 years old. As the oldest, I was the scapegoat, and my sister was the golden child. And, of course, we're talking more about scapegoat in a minute. And then lastly, denial is a major tool used too often. Thank you very much for your program. I would give anything to have Dr. Judy as my therapist.
That's so beautiful.
Close by as my therapist.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you so much for that. And so one other thing I wanted to say is, again, I can't overemphasize that my philosophy was born out of attempting to heal global disconnect. If you go on my website, healingglobalDisconnect.com, you'll understand more of my philosophy, and you're welcome to jump on board and
get involved.
Put your comments in there. And no matter who our president is or isn't, we as people are the cause of the outcome of our lives. And even though the presidency and the government in some way creates a hostage situation, okay, because their laws and their decisions directly impact us, just like mothers' and fathers' decisions directly impact us. I'm really asking each one of you to spread the message internally and externally that we are a united nations, and this is not a time for us to fracture off into isms, Democratism, Republicanism, black, white, Jewish, Muslim, Christian. We are one people here.
It's one world.
One world.
Yeah.
And we are intricately interconnected. And I believe that if we can hold on to that philosophy, it's going to make us stronger. And ultimately, we are the United States.
We still are a melting pot. Sometimes
Yes,
it's
we
a little
are.
too of this or too that, but we're still a melting pot.
Yeah.
So the scapegoat child is the problem child. They're the troublemaker, and he or she helps the family take the focus off the family's problems and pulling the negative attention onto him or herself. On the outside, they look angry, sullen, strong, rebellious, wild, defiant, rude, tough, or mouthy. They can have unplanned pregnancies, legal troubles, and engage in alcohol and abuse. They really are candidates for abuse, drug and alcohol.
So Walt, what's happening here and what you described is that the level of health of a family is going to be determined by how the children are doing. And if they're not doing really well, that means mom and dad are not doing well, and they haven't really healed their own wounds, and they're projecting their issues onto the children, and then the children are acting out. It's a system gone wrong.
It's a dynamic system that's definitely gone wrong.
Right.
And on the inside, the scapegoat often feels hurt, afraid to trust, rejected by the family, or if it's in a business, it's going to be rejected, of course, by the employees, misunderstood, hopeless, blamed, and betrayed.
Right.
So it's quite a stew there.
Right.
One thing that really hit me on one article I read was they live in fear. I just thought that just was something that just came out and hit me. They become afraid to defend themselves and express their opinions or demand fair treatment. They've kind of given up.
Yeah, they have. And so there's the repression,
Uh-huh.
and there's the beginning of depression.
Lifelong victim.
Okay,
Yep.
the depression. Yep.
And to find a way to break the pattern. Okay, they're kind of like the family shock absorber, which I thought was an interesting analogy. So they're the ones that take all the brunt in the family and out, and in many instances, they really are ostracized. They aren't even, like, for example, there's one story this guy took. He was the first guy to get a college degree. And basically, he made everybody in the family look bad because he was the one that actually broke out and was successful and got a college degree, and they didn't acknowledge him. When his mother went and got her GED, she threw this gigantic party just because she got a, equivalent of a high school diploma, and he wasn't even invited.
Yeah, so we talk about the different roles people play in the family. Last week it was the golden child. And
Lost child.
The lost child. Next week is the golden child.
Yes.
Okay, so lost child is the quiet one, the one that is ignored, neglected.
hides,
right,
neglected.
and the scapegoat gets rotten tomatoes thrown
Yes.
at him or her.
Yes.
And so that's why they're called the scapegoat, because the family is projecting their issues onto the child.
And this one person said they walked around ashamed to be alive. And there's two outcomes, if we're going to boil this down to a scapegoat child. One is they become a narcissist themselves. They emulate mom or dad. And the second, narcissism, being what it is we know, or they internalize the early message that they are worthless, and defense has no, and they have no rights, which is more commonly what happens.
We talk a lot about negative core beliefs. So, what do you think of this one for the scapegoat? I think. What do you think their negative core belief is?
I'm not worthy. I'm worthless. Nobody's going to pay attention to me.
How about it's all my fault?
It's all my fault.
It's all my fault.
They get the blame,
Right?
big time.
Blamed and shamed.
Big time.
Right.
Yeah, even though they're the black sheep of the family. Yep. They're kind of like the canary in a coal mine, someone said. In other words, the emperor will walk by and not have any clothes, and the scapegoat child is one of the ones that are going to point out, hey, the emperor doesn't have any clothes, but they're going to shut him down because everybody else believes, and the emperor believes, hey, I got clothes on. So if that gets them bullied and kind of in trouble.
So their reality is not validated.
No, it's not.
Which makes them nuts, because they want to trust their parents, but they want to trust their own mind. And as we've spoken about before, children will always think, or usually think, especially young children, they'll think that their parents are right, and there's something wrong with them.
Well, usually they're the second child. So it's
The
interesting.
scapegoat?
The scapegoat is the second child.
And the
They're never
first
the first.
one is the golden.
Usually it's the golden child.
Right.
And they usually provide sufficient distraction from the real core issue of the addiction or mental health of the parents. So they're kind of like, don't pay attention to mom and dad. They're the symptom bearer, as you've said, of the
Symptom
family.
bearer, right.
They get in trouble at school. Parents can fight over whether this bad kid is misunderstood or a bad kid. Maybe it's both. And you going to say something?
Go ahead, finish. I
Inside,
had a thought.
no, go for it.
Well, I'm thinking about a certain case that I remember, and I talk about cultural injuries, and this is an example of a cultural injury. Hispanic family where the firstborn was named after father, very traditional, okay? And the second child was actually the brilliant child, and the first child was actually quite average and not a very good student. So the second child was scapegoated by his father because when he excelled, he was ignored and he was punished for doing good work because, as his father saw it, he was hurting his brother's feelings.
There you go.
So he was the scapegoat because the parents couldn't stand the fact that the firstborn child wasn't the child that excelled. So they had to put down the second child and scapegoat him to save face for
and to bring up
the firstborn.
Bring up the firstborn.
Right.
Yeah, and
right.
gosh,
that's a cultural injury.
That's a messy dynamic.
Yeah.
Inside, as we said, they feel like they're very insecure and not good enough. Outside, parents are presents angry and rebel. A couple more. They fight with authority because again, they're rebelling against the authority that they've had in the house, right? With their authority figures at every step, they become addicted. And lastly, they present a problem. If it's once often presented with a problem, they try and help and solve it. They're good problem solvers because they were able to identify stuff. So, but what does a home look like? There's a couple of things here that were interesting. A parent who systematically singles out a child for blame when things go wrong in the family, and just kind of elaborated on that. The parent punishes one child more severely than another.
Yeah.
Right?
And sometimes that happens. For example, if there isn't a good bond between the husband and the wife, and the little boy looks like the husband who the wife hates, for example.
And
even if
how could that be his fault?
She divorces the husband, he'll get the brunt of it because that little child will remind her
every time
of her ex-husband or the husband that she hates. And there's going to be this family projection process whereby she'll project all of her anger and hatred onto the little boy.
Yep.
And he won't understand, why is this happening? It's all very unconscious.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, will they ever change?
Not
Since
unless
it's unconscious.
you
Let me give you an
bring
example.
it to the conscious,
Yes.
right?
You talk about unconscious. Let me expand on this. I've been meaning to elaborate this in previous shows. It's like a GPS. Let's say you're driving somewhere and you've plugged in your GPS to go take you to a destination. And you change your mind and you want to go to a different place. Maybe you want to go to work, but you decide to go to, a grocery store first. But you don't change your GPS to take you to the grocery store. You leave it on work. Every time you look at that GPS, it's going to tell you, turn here, turn here, turn here, and it's going to divert you back to your original destination. Even though you aren't going there, it's telling you to go there because you haven't reprogrammed it.
Right, and that's the unconscious,
it's
is what you're
conscious
saying.
internal
Right.
GPS.
Yeah, and that's the WTF. That's why we call the show Dr.
What
Judy
the
WTF. What the Freud? Those repetitive patterns that keep you keep leading you back to the old.
Yeah, their GPS is never going to be reprogrammed.
Right.
So they're punished the child more severely. They assign undesirable responsibilities and chores, more so to one than the other. They're playing favorites. Routinely speak more negatively about them. And again, this could be done at workplace as well, right? Your boss is speaking more negatively about one person, or you can do the hard stuff and they're going to do the easy stuff. Refuses to intervene or take notice when other siblings bully, hurt, or abuse one child or the family. So, but you have to understand, this is not your fault.
Right.
It's just the dynamics of how it was set up.
And
it's beyond your control.
Imagine what this does to the relationship between the siblings, okay?
Absolutely.
It's not a pretty picture because the golden child and the scapegoat are now rivals.
They're
and
at
who's
odds.
the cause?
They're
okay,
odds.
and then the parents will blame the brothers for fighting, and actually they're the cause of the system gone wrong.
And many times the parents like drama. So they're enjoying watching the show.
They're enjoying it, but they caused it, and then they blame the children for being at each other's throats when they're the ones that imbalanced the system in the first place. So what I think is most painful for a child, I was just talking about this today, is when parents create the horrible symptoms. They don't like what they've created, and then they blame the children for acting that way. They blame the children for being angry. They blame the children for speaking back, or they blame the children for the poor grades, and they don't have a connection to the fact that they're the cause of those symptoms. And so the child
They're
is
not going to take responsibility.
devastated.
They're not going to take responsibility for that.
Well, no, and then the child is left with this crazy feeling in their head that, wait a minute, don't you get that I'm doing such and so because I'm not well? Don't you understand your piece of it? And this conversation never happens. So usually the child will blame himself that I'm wrong, I'm bad. You're right, Mom. You're right, Dad. I'm the loser. I'm the one that's getting the poor grades. I'm the one that's angry and acting out. But they never connect the dots back to the cause.
No, they never do.
Which is what we do in the system. We connect it back so it brings some sanity to the situation.
And that's one reason why the mind map that Dr. Judy's developed really does work, because she's flipped it. It's not your problem. You're not the problem. The dynamics is the problem. And so the cause is not you, it's the dynamics and your parents.
Right. And their parent, and this is not a blame model. This
No.
is a multi-generational causal model.
Where's it coming from?
Well, if your mom's not well and your dad's not well, that means that their parents aren't too well, and your grandparents and great-grandparents and so on.
What's interesting is what happens because they grow up, right? What happens when the scapegoat leaves? See, if a scapegoat leaves, right, they're going to grow up and get married or go get a job or whatever, right? The discord in the remainder of the family often increases because the scapegoat was the buffer. So you're out of it as the scapegoat, and you're watching the dynamics, and it's like, holy mackerel, it's even worse.
Right.
Yep. And then you step back in, it's even you're jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. So what are you to do if you're a scapegoat? So I wanted to touch on that, and we can expand upon that, which I think is really important. Okay. One, understand, again, this is not your fault and never, ever was. You are not bad, and you have been taught a false image of yourself. Begin sorting through the false images and accusations, and it's really difficult to do, but keeping a journal and writing things down so you can reflect on it, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember that, and obviously getting some help in therapy is important. You can't do this by yourself.
By the way, I'm not crying, but my cold and my laryngitis is getting worse.
Okay. Realize that in a very real sense, by using you as a scapegoat, your narcissistic mother, for example, has already cast you out even while you were standing in front of her. Again, it's the dynamic. It's not your fault. So stop trying to win the approval of a narcissistic parent. The best analogy I can give is what Dr. Judy has stated. It's like they're a gigantic glass with a big, huge crack in it. You can pour as much into that glass as you want, and it's never going to be full, and it's never going to be satisfied.
Right.
So don't expect to receive an admission, a sincere apology, genuine remorse, or any other validation, because it's not in their DNA.
That's why it's so hard to have a truth conversation with them, because to have a truth conversation with them confronts their wounds, and they don't want to open up their can of worms, so they're going to deny it, and it's going to be an exercise in futility, frustration,
and you're going to make it crazy.
Right.
So what you have to do, which is the best thing in the world, is establish boundaries. And unfortunately, in many cases, that means you're not hanging around with them anymore.
Sometimes not.
Yep. Begin setting healthy boundaries, and sometimes you're the silent partner with your mother's silent partner and flying monkeys. Okay, they won't like that, but you know what? So you got to be prepared. Narcissists do not understand the word no. Refuse to be their slave or the family slave, right? You're the one that's going to do all the stuff they don't want somebody else to do. Well, you're not the scapegoat. You're not the doormat anymore.
And get some help, because you don't want to visit this on your next family, meaning your new family, your husband, wife, children, so on. You want to stop that multi-generational transmission process, and that's why it's so important for people to get help before they have children, if possible. And if you've already had children, get help so that you can clean it up with your children.
Yeah. Because realize that you may very well lose the relationships if you go no contact. But the last thing here is, if that has already occurred or is going to occur, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because you were already shunned and ostracized in the first place.
Right.
You just have more freedom and don't have to be under that thumb and be that doormat anymore.
Yeah.
So.
And people ask me about the no contact thing. I think that in some cases you have to go no contact if it's that destructive to your life. I prefer the limited contact, because it's super hard to cut your parents off for life unless it's really affecting your mental health to the degree that you're just not surviving it anymore. There are ways to deal with injurious parents so that you keep in light touch with them and you have adequate boundaries with them, and you don't allow them to activate your negative core beliefs about yourself.
Well, here's one. Yes. Know your true self. Identify expectations to the negative stereotype you've been saddled with. In other words, pinpoint what is good, likable, at least adequate about you. And you want to write it down. Remember that the shame, the guilt, the self-blaming belong to the perpetrators, the one that that's throwing all this garbage at you, not you as the target.
And I use the word psychovirus as a metaphor for the messages that get into your head and reverberate. So if the messaging from your parents is that you're bad or it's all your fault, then the way it works is that you ingest that message, and they don't even have to be there anymore because the message has now gone psycho in your brain. It's spread, so to speak, and it keeps being repeated by you. So you're now self-infecting, if you will.
Well, again, it says here, you are simply a dumping ground for their bad feelings.
That's
so
right.
The psychovirus is no longer. You now, through the mind map and through therapy, you have an antivirus.
What kind of virus?
Antivirus.
I remember telling one of my patients that she needed anti-mommies and anti-daddies because they were infecting her. I love the biological model because I was a bio major, so it's no wonder.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
So learn to question and reject seeing yourself as bad, because you're not. You're really not. So figure out what might be doing consciously and unconsciously that gives scapegoats an idea that it's okay to take the abuse. Sometimes we don't even know it, but we play the victim because that's all we've known, and we attract that kind of stuff.
Right.
And again, you can't figure that out yourself. It's like a blind spot. So you need someone else to point it out. And that's what therapy's for, okay? And that's, as a friend of mine said, it's the best investment you can ever make in yourself. So anyway, understand, take time to learn how to love and appreciate yourself. And you take time for you. You've been trained to be overly self-critical, and you may become defensive, so you've got to be patient. And the goal here is we're trying to break the cycle.
Yeah, so I work a lot with family dynamics. I think in an ideal world, it's a brilliant idea to do family therapy. A lot of people come in and they want us, meaning my team, to fix their children, and it's impossible to fix a child and send them back into the same poisonous situation. So we've got to get the whole family dynamics right. And so my philosophy is child therapy in and of itself is not enough, because you need to call the parents in and work with the entire system, because it's kind of like without that, you're also sending a message to the child that it's all their fault, that they're the problem. And again, they're not the problem, they're the effect of the problem. So you've got to fix it at the causal level.
But if you're told forever that it's your fault, it's your problem, then if you hear it enough times, just like, just to give you another cliche phrase, how many times have you heard the phrase, money does not grow on trees, right? Well, no, it doesn't, but you know what? That doesn't mean that there's not enough money to go around, and therefore we learn scarcity, and so therefore it relates with the money, so we're always having this viewpoint that there isn't enough money because it doesn't grow on trees. But if you just change your perspective and you look at it from a different perspective, then you have a little more healthy one, and realize that, you know, there are ways to make money and it doesn't grow on trees, but you can create a business, for example, that creates money, which means it kind of is like a tree.
Yeah, the tree of your own creativity.
Tree of your own creativity.
And your efforts.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
So a couple of things just to be a little more global here, since narcissism is just a phenomenal lot of
Rampant.
pain. It's just incredible. How do you know if you're even being raised by narcissists? Because I've been talking to some folks that says, well, I never thought about it, but I guess my parents are, right? I mean, okay. One, again, along the lines of Scapegoat, is you are not a doormat, right? I mean, let's start from the beginning. To the outside, your dad is larger than life. The social magnet who attracts people from all walks of life. He's just a phenomenally great guy, and everybody loves him. And your mom is that perfect woman, always looking to please and juggling everything with ease. But underneath all that and behind closed doors, it's all a facade. And again, you're going crazy because everybody loves your dad, but he's totally different with you. Everybody loves your mom, but she's totally different with you. And you can't convince anybody otherwise because they put on this big facade out in the front.
Right, and that's what's so crazy making is they may complain to the members of the family or their friends, and they're all confirming the fact your mom's such a kind person. She's so generous. She's so so fair and so's your dad, but then that doesn't seem to be your reality. So it's really, really confusing.
A classic example is I had a friend of mine when she was a kid. Her mom was very, very controlling and was trying to figure out what the kid was doing. And so mom actually commandeered and hijacked the school bus and drove it through, I think, a Dairy Queen. And that way she bought everybody on the bus ice cream, right? And so everybody's going, well, your mom is really cool. And, she bought me ice cream. And we went through the Dairy Queen, in a school bus. And this was really cool. And it was a Wednesday.
Sure.
Not realizing that, she was just trying to put on a cool face for everybody and realize that, what's wrong with your mom? And she took us to Dairy Queen. Negating the fact that every other parent is waiting at school for where's their, waiting at home, where's my kid, dinner and other stuff. And there she's tootling around. And I can't even believe the bus driver pulled that off. And going somewhere which isn't even approved or authorized and buying everybody ice cream.
And not informing the parents.
So
to the children, she looks fantastic.
Absolutely.
To the parents, she looks like a really irresponsible jerk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's just that's crazy making.
And guess which one the children are going to believe.
Right. What do you mean? She bought me ice cream. That's really cool. Let's do it again. A narcissistic parent will triangulate over the family to address their own desires without giving much thought to what anybody else needs, like taking everybody to the Dairy Queen and buying them ice cream. And doesn't give a rip about all the ramifications. Because some adults, children, narcissists actually overcorrect and bend over backwards to make sure mom and dad are happy. Excuse me. They tend to let people walk all over them because they're not in touch with what they need and they don't really know how to express it because they haven't learned, right? They're not able to say, you know what, I matter. I have needs because, I'm an individual and I'm a person. So, that's just the challenge. So you need to become aware of that and try and be a little bit more independent, set boundaries, and stand up for yourself.
I just had another thought about that sometimes the family projection process can be so harsh on one of the children that maybe another child can take the role of scapegoat just to take the pressure off that one. And that happens sometimes, that one is being so abused that another might start acting out or even becoming that mascot, which we're going to talk about another time.
Next week, we're going to talk about the golden child, and then we're going to finish with the mascot, which is kind of the classic, the clown. Again, that's one of the middle child and tries to gets attention and such.
Yes, right.
So, again, you might be afraid that you are a narcissist, right? Not everyone overcorrects and reacts the same to narcissism. So the only way to avoid ridicule and abuse is to become like your narcissistic parent.
Identification with the aggressor.
That's what they know.
And when we use the word narcissism, it means that there's an injury to the core of the self. And so typically narcissists will demean, they'll devalue, they'll destroy, they lack empathy. These are typical definitions of a narcissist, but underneath it all is a wounded person who needed to cauterize or cut their feelings because they themselves were so demeaned, devalued, and destroyed that now they don't have any more emotion left in them.
Well, one thing I really like about your system, Dr. Judy, is we are focusing on the wound, not the individual.
Right.
Because everybody is an individual, and just because they're a narcissist, they are a narcissist, but more importantly, they're an individual with a big wound, and as a result of that wound and pain, they became a narcissist.
Right. So this is a system gone wrong. It's not like you're born a narcissist or you're permanently a narcissist. No. These dynamics can be healed. So it's not like you're stuck in this. And so very important to understand that these labels are just used to kind of speak a language that people can identify, but it's really the system that we're looking at. And so we talk a lot about borderlines and narcissists, and I've seen it flip over so that a narcissist may act like a borderline when the borderline starts backing out of the system and saying sayonara to the narcissist. All of a sudden, the deep core issues of abandonment of the narcissist who was well defended now gets exposed and they freak out. Okay?
They do freak out.
So part of healing is recognizing that you are not your wounds. Okay? You're having a horrible reaction to the cause of your wounds, the childhood injuries. So these narcissistic traits and narcissistic patterns are they're all reactions. And if we clean them up, then you can go back to your true, authentic self and start aligning yourself with your inner core of health. Okay? And if you have to learn it from another source, so be it. If you can learn it from your family of origin, that's what this psychoeducational course is focused on, is to learn that you are not your injuries. Okay, you can step outside of them.
And again, you have to remember that narcissists are very, very insecure people. They put this.
They're injured, insecure people.
Very injured and very insecure. It's just a wall, because it says here they don't want to show. If they don't show strength at first, they could be crushed, because ultimately, deep down, they're really afraid. They're really afraid, and they learned it from childhood.
Right.
Yeah. So you feel relentlessly competitive with and resentful toward your siblings. Again, that's the family dynamic, right? Narcissists have trouble with personal boundaries and view other people as extensions of themselves. Got a friend who bought a house, and their mother was coming over and constantly cleaning the house. And I said, the reason is because you are an extension of your mother. The house is an extension of you, which means the house is an extension of the mother. And so if it's a dirty house, the mother thinks she's dirty.
Is about them.
And it's always about them.
Right. That's why they project so much. That's why the scapegoat is so handy, because they can project all their anger onto that one identified patient.
Right. So it's like, well, why is my mother always coming over and rearranging everything and fixing everything and moving everything and sweeping? And it's like, because
your reflection.
It's a total reflection on her.
Right.
Even though it's your house and not her house, doesn't matter. It's always about her and and a reflection on her. Because then one of her friends comes over and says, oh my gosh, her house was filthy. She's going to take that as a personal affront. And
so see how there's not
that spills over to everything.
That there's no empathy there. It's
None.
not like mom is thinking, my kid is overwhelmed. Maybe I should help clean up a little bit so that I can help my son or daughter. It's not coming from that consciousness
it's not.
Of helping another human being. It's coming from the consciousness of, this doesn't reflect well on me. And so whenever we come from the consciousness of criticism, or I'll call it, just for convenience sake, the dark consciousness versus the light consciousness, it will always end in panel 4, 5, 6, chaos, defenses, breakdowns. What the Freud? WTF. It's that repeat pattern.
And again, the only way to solve that problem is 1, set boundaries. 2, if your mother has a key to your house, change the lock. They're not going to be happy, but change the lock so they can't come in when you're not there and goof everything up. It's your domain and your place, for example, in this example. So again, changing the lock is how you set the boundaries, and boundaries are really important, okay? At times, you felt like you were more your parent's partner than their child. And again, some narcissists demand their attention of the room by playing the victim or describing their problems as greater than anyone else's, and that's the covert narcissism in some respects. And they spend their entire childhood running to put out one fire after another and trying to maintain peace, and so that no one gets hurt. And all the while, they're just trying to kowtow to the narcissistic parent, and it's never ending. Never ending. Again, boundaries. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. You derive your self-worth solely from your achievements. And again, if your parents don't acknowledge your achievements, and they don't say, well, hey, man, the fact that you were the first one that got a college degree, or, you did great on the swim team, then you are going to be devalued and feel you're not worthy, because your parents, for goodness sakes, don't even acknowledge it, even though you performing in that thing was an extension of them, and it makes you look good, them look good. You'd think they'd be thrilled, but sometimes they're not.
So demotivational.
It's very demotivational. The only way to get along in this world to do as a parent does and derive self-worth from production and performance. The problem is the only thing that matters is what I can produce in the world, not what other people think. So
when the people get the drift that they're really doing it because it's pleasing the parent, then can you imagine, Walt, that one way to punish the parent is to make their parent look bad? So if they look bad, the parent is going to look bad.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of like the reverse, where the kid is punishing the parent because he or she knows that they've got to wear certain clothes or have their hair a certain way or have their house a certain way or their grades a certain way. So it's the ultimate FU to the parents to not comply.
And then more wrath comes down because
they're not pleasing the parent again.
They're not.
It's vicious circle.
It's a very, very loaded stew, and it's a very vicious circle.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for.
Really? The clock is the tyrant once again.
The clock is the tyrant because we have to finish with our song, which every show we do. And we're going to shrink a tune, and I'm going to read the lyrics of a very popular song. It's sort of narcissistic related by Adele this week, and it's called Set Fire to the Rain. And so I'm going to read the lyrics, and Dr. Judy's going to interpret this. And, well, next week we're going to talk about the golden child. Maybe it's more fun. I let it fall, my heart. As it fell, you rose to claim it. It was dark, and I was over, until you kissed my lips and you saved me.
So somebody's putting her heart in somebody else's hands, and as it fell, you rose to claim it. So the hope is that whoever grabs her heart or claims the heart will treat it well.
My hands, they're strong, but my knees were far too weak to stand in your arms without falling to your feet.
So this is kind of like the vulnerability of the person who's letting go and trusting, and there's a kind of an idealizing of this. He's falling to the feet of the person, idealization of the person.
But there's a side to you that I never knew. All the things you say, they were never true. All the games you play, you would always win.
So it was really never an authentic relationship. It was a win-lose dynamic, and this idea that her heart was safe was just somebody's game in some sense. So where's the authenticity, right?
Yeah, but it's a game.
Right.
And we have a chorus. But I set fire to the rain, watched it pour as I touched your face. Well, it burned while I cried, because I heard it screaming out your name. When I lay with you, I could stay there. Close your eyes, feel you forever. You and me together, nothing gets better.
So somebody's back in their idealized state, right?
Because there's a side of you that I never knew. All the things you say, they were never true. All the games you'd play, you'd always win.
The false self, they were never true. Right.
But again, I set fire to the rain, watched it pour as I touched your face. Well, it burned while I cried, because I heard it screaming out your name. I set fire to the rain. I threw us into the flames. When it fell, something died, because I knew that was the last time. So
I think this really describes the fact that the idealism died, okay? So they
fell off the pedestal.
Us into the flames, that we're done, and something died. Yeah, the hope that this was real died.
Yeah, it totally fell off the pedestal. Sometimes I wake up by the door. That heart you caught must be waiting for you. Even now, when we're already over, I can't help myself from looking for you.
The idealized object, right?
Yeah. And then lastly, of course, the chorus. I set fire to the rain, watched it pour as I touched your face. Well, it burned while I cried, because I heard it screaming out your name. I set fire to the rain. I threw us into the flames. When it fell, something died, because I knew that was the last time. The last time.
Right. So this person wasn't going to go back into this any longer. It's going to allow the whole rotten system to burn.
Because they stood up. They finally realized it. They stood up for themselves.
Right.
And they realized they were better off by themselves.
And that's the scapegoat, right? Is finally standing up for yourself and realizing that this whole deck of cards is a house of cards. There's no authenticity to it, that you really do matter, and that it is not your fault. And so once you realize that, the gig is up, and you can throw the entire system into the fire and set yourself free.
And watch it burn.
And watch it burn.
Because it will.
Right.
That, of course, is Set Fire to the Rain by Adele, the song we shrunk this week. You've been listening to, and thank you for tuning in to Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud, here on UBN Radio Network. We're here every Thursday at 8 o'clock Pacific here in the Los Angeles area. And you can catch us on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, of course, here at UBN Radio Network, and YouTube. So next week, we're going to continue our series on children of narcissism. We're going to talk about the golden child. If you have any questions or comments, you can write us, and a lot of you are, at info@drjudywtf.com. And we'll definitely get back to you and send you the notes or whatever you request, or a song you want to shrink. So until next time, God bless everybody. And I just killed the song. I lost it.
You set fire to the
I said fire at the wrong button. I said fire to the song.
Jeez.
So anyway, that's it, folks. You take care, and we'll throw it on.